Shane.
Good morning.
Morning.
We're currently in the Legislative Chamber at 1819 Farner Street on the second floor, which internally is known as the LC level. The normal exit from this room will be the way we came in this morning. However, there are two emergency exits. One is located behind this accordion panel, where there's also a fire extinguisher, as well as one over here behind this accordion panel with a fire extinguisher, as well as the only AED for this room. With the AED location in mind, can I have a show of hands of who's CPR trained in the room? Thank you. If there is a medical emergency, we will have Stefan Davis contact 911 from security kiosk at the bottom of the escalator. Should we need to evacuate the building today, we prefer to use this exit over here. And we'll co-locate ourselves at the bottom of the stairs near the flagpole for accountability. This concludes the safety briefing.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Cook. Here. Friend.
Here.
Frost. McGowan.
Here.
Howard.
Here.
Kavanaugh.
Here.
Bagley.
Here.
I would like to advise those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is on the wall of the Legislative Chamber. I would also like to announce that this meeting is being broadcast live. Item 4 will be the recognition of United Way members. Employees and retirees participated in the district's annual United Way drive earlier this fall. On behalf of this board, I would like to thank everyone who donated this year. We would like to take this opportunity to recognize our co-chair, Geneva Patterson, and her committee for their work. Would the committee please come forward and gather right in front of the television here? The committee participated in the United Way's Day of Caring in September. They volunteered at the Nebraska Children's Home Society in Millard, sorting through items for their daycare, and organizing them for other nonprofits to use. The organization offers adoption and fostering assistance and provides family support services. In conjunction with that project, the committee organized a diaper drive. Employees donated more than 4,500 diapers to the Nebraska Children's Home Society. The committee also organized nothing bundt cake sales, with 20% of the proceeds benefiting the campaign. All told, our employees and retirees donated more than $107,000. Joining us today, the representative from United Way, Grant Sorrell. And Grant, if you want to come forward also. He's there. In addition to Geneva and Grant, this year's committee included Padma Chigarupati, Kyle Crum, Darrell James, Stephanie Lemons, Melissa Polito, Forrest Ruse, Bill Sargent, Caleb Sturgeon, and Janetta Walker. Let's give them a round of applause. At this time, I'd like to present Geneva with the plaque, and also the other committee members with their certificates.
I could take a quick photo. We moved in together. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Good job, good job.
Moving on, construction operations. Mr. DeBoer.
Yeah, cake sales. I'm always good for putting money in for cake sales. I'll guarantee you that. So, good morning, and I'm Dave DeBoer, Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer. We'll get started today under tab 5, the capital expenditures letter. We have 4 expenditures, and I'll be highlighting 2 of them. The first expenditure is item 1 under Buildings, Plants, and Equipment for $200,000. This expenditure installs 21 carbon monoxide detectors in our water treatment plants and repump stations. The detectors will alarm in the event there is a leak in our engine-driven pump exhaust system. The alarm includes warning lights located inside and outside the building, as well as an audible alarm inside the building. A signal from the detectors located in the repump stations will be sent to systems control, and a signal from the detectors located at the water treatment plants will be sent back to the plant operators. The second item I'd like to highlight is under Buildings, Plants, and Equipment for $400,000. This item is an SAP Business Planning and Consolidation application. This tool provides planning, enhanced budgeting, and forecasting for district personnel. The district's current budgeting effort is a manual process using multiple Excel spreadsheets. This tool will reduce budget preparation time, improve efficiencies for department managers and financial analysts, and the district will also receive improved reporting capabilities to assist in making business decisions. So that's the capital expenditure letter. Any questions on the capital expenditures letter?
Go ahead, push here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
On the item number 1, 200,000 for 21 CO2 detection systems, that's 9,500 each. It seems kind of high, and I was just wondering, did we go out for bid on that, or does that seem high to you?
Yeah, so those detectors will primarily be installed by our personnel. So we believe right now that those detectors will be installed at those individual locations. And again, you've got alarm detections that have a SCADA signal that'll go back to both our plants as well as systems control. So it's not your prototypical residential commercial detector. This involves signal processing that'll go back to our system controllers.
Did we go out for bid on those?
I would say for the detectors, yes, but for the installation, the contracting work, right now, I believe we'll probably be doing most of that in-house.
Okay, all right. And then on item number 2, on the planning and for the budget and all that, what will we as the board see different as a result of that? Is this all internal expediting the spreadsheets, like you said, and the process that bubbles up? Will we see anything different in the results of this, the budget?
Correct. So yeah, this is really a process tool to really implement a better forecasting model and reportability for making those business decisions. And I know Joe's got a few bullets that he was going to speak to on that too.
So Mike, I mean, good question. So this was originally planned to occur a little sooner, and it had to pass internal scrutiny, as you might imagine. So we did a business process improvement team about 18 months ago looking at the budget process, and that was led by Mark Myers. And during that process, we determined that, not surprisingly, there's over 50 people throughout the district involved in the process, consuming about 6 months and 4,400 hours for those people. So one of the things that this is designed to do, one is to automate the system a bit. This module, it's an SAP module that's fully integrated with the system, including with success factors. So one of the more tedious components of budget is we budget at the individual staff level, so the system will be able to grab that data right from success factors. And we hope the benefit is, this is what accountants and finance people do, but we're hoping to free up more of the non-financial people to focus on more of the day-to-day needs and more of the strategic needs of the district. I mean, certainly budgeting is important, but they've got a day job also focused on things like water main breaks and infrastructure replacement cheaper and things like that. So it's geared at a lot of those different things. It'll also enable us, we hope, to shorten the process and make it more nimble, do more what-ifs, things like that. Right now we scramble, as you can imagine, because we have a lot of disparate Excel spreadsheets that comprise the budget process.
So will this board see any different output?
What I would say, Mike, is we're hoping to start reporting on the business from more what I'd call a multi-dimensional capacity. Right now, the way we report on business tends to be more, I'll say, action-oriented or process-oriented, meaning like distribution, water pumping. It seems like another view that may be more meaningful is salaries and wages, benefits, chemicals. So a different way to manage the business. We hope what you see is better decision-making. But can I point to a specific product you'll see that's different? Not necessarily. I don't think the December board presentation will be any different.
Will it enhance our ability to do multi-year forecast budgets?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we do that today, as you know, but this will make it a much more integrated process.
Right.
Right.
Joe, from my understanding, from what you just said. Sorry. Am I on? All right. Sorry. Joe, from my understanding, from what you said, it won't necessarily impact, as you explained to Mike, anything we get. It'll make the process more efficient for the staff going back to June when this preparation begins, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Very good. Any other questions on the capital expenditures letter? Okay, moving into tab 6, acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates. Item A, WSP USA Contracting Services at 117th and Fort Propane Air Plant. I'm going to speak separately on that one on tab 7. And then items B, roll-off construction, and D, cedar construction, E, Q3 contracting, all on page 2. They had slight increases in unit quantities, but otherwise pretty solid finals coming through on those other 3 projects. Any other questions on, other than item A, any other comments related to contracts and payments of final estimates? Okay, tab 7. Under tab 7 is an amendment number 1 for professional engineering services in support of our 117th and Fort Propane Air Plant. The original scope of this contract was to set a casing patch and inspect and perform minor repairs on our propane pumps. The vertical pumps are located about 500 feet deep at the bottom of the propane cavern. The pump has 30 stages and is driven by a surface-mounted motor. The pump is connected to the motor by a 500-foot shaft and aligned in the casing with bearings located every 10 feet. So you've got about 45 to 50 sets of bearings all up and down the casing to keep the shaft all aligned. The pump's shaft and bearings were all removed and sent to the manufacturer for inspection. Upon the review, it was determined that the pump should be overhauled. The bearings all up and down that shaft needed to be replaced, and 14 impeller assemblies needed to be repaired too. This amendment covers those expenditures at a total cost of $98,250. The system has been all reinstalled and is available for this heating season. Any questions on tab 7 or amendment 1 related to the professional engineering services for the propane cavern at 114th and 4th?
I have a couple questions,
Yeah.
Dave. First to Jim Knight. How much of this propane from the LNG on 4th Street did we use last winter?
Very little.
Very little? Did most of our propane usage come from Grover then?
We used very little propane last winter.
Okay, so last year when we looked at the prices of propane, our peak shaving, and the LNG peak shaving, LNG comes first, then propane. You said it was a lot cheaper than the spot market on those days we saved so much money. I remember that, correct? Or we do?
Last winter, we didn't use that much propane.
Okay. Whenever we do use propane, I think it's been said that it's cheaper than going out to the spot market on those days.
Correct.
When that comparison is made to the spot market, is it an all-in comparison for all the costs of the LNG, including this $485,000 or whatever it's going to be?
I just look at the variable costs to replace the propane.
See, I think then we ought to start looking at the total all-in cost, because you're looking at $500,000 for this propane there. And then you're also looking at doing the same thing for 4th Street, or Grover Street in the
Pardon
next
me,
year or two.
Mike, Mark Doyle, President. If this is going to be a significant discussion, could we ask Jim to come up to the podium, please? My apologies, but I want to make sure we have a record here.
What is peak shaving? That's real cold in our gas supplies that we get from North
Thank you.
Central aren't enough. We do our peak shaving, the peak market, the peak day is where it's the highest demand area.
Jim Knight, Vice President, Gas Operations. So I compare the variable cost when we use the propane to the spot market. The fixed costs of the O&M running the propane air plant and the capital costs, I compare that to the demand charges we would pay on the pipeline. So I am looking at, when I look at the benefits of those plants, that's how I look at it.
But I'm saying maybe we ought to look at it differently, because if you look at the all-in cost of LNG, like you just said, we used very little LNG last year, and there's been years where we don't use it at all. But we have a lot of fixed costs that we continually incur. And when you look at the all-in costs with the fixed costs, maybe we're better off on a few days, go out to the spot market and pay $50 or whatever it is on the spot market. When you look at the total cost of the delivered LNG versus the potential substitute cost of the spot market.
We need to have a further discussion.
Okay, I guess I'd like to have management think about that and see what that all-in cost is compared to the actual usage and what we need, and versus the spot market.
Because I'm usually just looking at the incremental cost on that day.
I understand that on a day-to-day, when you have a decision to make,
Right.
on that day, it's cold outside and we have a peak need, what do I do? Do I run my LNG or do I go out to the spot market? But I'm just saying, if you have what the LNG really costs our ratepayers, with the O&M, with all this, we got another $500,000 here we're approving, and I talked to Dave, we're gonna be doing the same thing for the Grover plant, another $500,000. When do we stop putting money into that for a few days usage when we could go out in the spot market?
Can I ask a clarification question that kind of dovetails into what we were talking about? Jim, the assumption here that I have is that this O&M costs that we're talking about today and future O&M costs would be there regardless, because it's something that we need to operate the propane to extract from the caverns, correct?
In order to keep them operational and ready to be run, yes.
So, notwithstanding Mike's question or his point, it's kind of comes down to, do we want to continue to operate those or not? Because if we don't, then we wouldn't put the money in. If we do, then however you factor this cost in, you've got to keep the plants operational, or otherwise we've got millions of gallons of propane we can't withdraw.
That's my point, Dave, is do we even need them or do we shut them down?
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify if kind of that's what, okay.
Because if we decide we need them, we want to keep them, yes, we have to maintain them, have them operational. But it seems to me we're spending a lot of money for a few days usage when we have another alternative. And I want to make sure that instead of using LNG with the all-in cost factor, it's factored appropriately given the spot market and even curtailing some of our curtailable customers.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that's what we were talking about.
And the other thing, go halfway. Do we need both plants? Can we just shut down one plant, save half of that O&M, and just have the one LNG since we didn't hardly use it?
Mark Doyle, President. Jim, this would be a good time probably to maybe brief the board on the committee we've organized internally and that we're looking at the entire operation. I understand the questions. I've had the same questions over the years. Why don't you do that and make sure that we highlight the fact that Joe Schaffert's a significant part of that committee?
Over the last 2 years, the board's authorized studies of the liquefaction system and the vaporization system at the LNG plant. They're both original to the plant from 1974. And it's in the long-term plans. Obviously, it would have to come back to the board for approval, and it's roughly in the $50 to $55 million. Now, we formed a committee of myself, Joe Schaffert, folks from engineering, safety and security, and we are looking at the long-term needs of the district and looking at, okay, this would be a major investment. What are our alternatives? I mean, the alternatives, if we do not have the peak shaving plants, would be to increase the amount of firm transportation we have on the pipeline. Okay, and you have to factor in, if you increase the firm transportation capacity on the pipeline, that does not also provide gas on a peak day. The peak shaving plants provide both. They provide a firm transportation service and a gas supply on those peak days. So we have a committee from across the district looking at all these costs. Okay, the studies have just recently been completed. We are going to be meeting with senior management here next month and go over the different scenarios going forward.
Okay, and I understand everything you said. And I don't think anyone questions the viability of our LNG plant. That is our crown jewel on a peak day, and we need to make sure we have that available and maintained. My concern is the next level is the propane air, having two plants and paying the money we pay for O&M and these capital improvements for only a few days usage. And so I would say, I'd like to hear about that study and the recommendations before I approve $500,000 this year and another $500,000 for LNG next year. My question is, do we really need them for that kind of money for an all-in cost? I know on the day-to-day, Jim, you make a decision. It's cold out. Should we run LNG or buy propane or buy spot market or run propane air? And that's a good decision to make. But you also have to remember how much money you spent to get to that point to make a decision.
And one of the options we're looking at is increasing the output of the LNG plant.
If you do that, then do you need the propane air?
That's exactly what we're looking at.
Okay, and then the other question is, I always wondered whether we needed both propane air tanks, whether we use very little of it every year, depends, but can we get by with just one?
If you increase the size of the LNG plant or it added more firm transportation capacity, then you do not.
Okay, as far as firm transportation capacity, I understand you have to buy more capacity from Northern Natural, pay a demand charge, pay an annual cost. How much is that annual cost you'd have to pay versus what we're spending on LNG, capital cost and O&M?
We're
Well-
getting pretty close to talking about the study, which I'm not totally uncomfortable
can.
with. I mean, I'll have it in my hands within days
Yeah.
to review, and it's a good study for me. It's very educational. Joe would tell you that the economics are surprisingly, not that we never distrust anything we're told, but we have a bigger group across the district, so more of us understand this in great detail. The economics of the firm supply versus LNG are compelling. Is that
Right.
fair to say,
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And also, in order to, I would say, from what I know, and maybe I'm a little deeper into this now since I'm, a different way I'm part of this company, I would highly recommend that this expenditure for 117th and Fort is appropriate. Now, if we were talking about 63rd, that might be a different discussion.
Correct.
We wouldn't be having that right now.
Mark,
No, and we have deferred
Yes.
doing this type of work at 63rd.
Yeah, and we can't let these things go in the interim. That's
Correct.
really the point.
Yeah.
when you said the money is appropriate for 120th and Fort there,
Yeah.
are you talking LNG or propane?
Propane,
Propane.
yes.
See, I guess I'd like to have some more information before I approve additional $100,000 on top of what we already put in to see if we really need to put that money in.
You'll get, yes,
Maybe you
you're,
could come back to us next month.
No,
with
Mike,
that
it's already
report.
spent.
yeah.
Pardon?
It's already
This
spent.
is, this is an amendment,
This is an amendment. This has already been spent.
It's already
Yes.
been spent.
but it's a good expenditure, in my opinion. But you're gonna get more information regardless.
Okay, well,
'Cause
I
we-
do want to see more information on the all-in cost of propane air versus spot market, all-in
Will.
cost of propane air versus buying more capacity from Northern Natural Gas, and the fact of whether we need two LNG or propane air plants.
Very good.
I mean, this is a great time to look at it. I
It
mean,
is.
especially, the cost for incremental transportation. Northern's asked for a 90% rate increase.
But they're not going to get that, we know that.
No, we'll see.
They won't. It's all subject to refund, and they'll be paying, what is the refund rate, 6%?
Something like that.
So, and this is the first rate increase Northern's had in, 15 years?
Yes.
So,
It's a whopper.
anyway,
Any other questions?
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, any other questions on tab 7 related to the amendment number 1 for professional engineering services at the 114th Street Cavern? All right, thank you.
John Zellers. Tab 8.
Good morning. I'm John Zellers, Director of Purchasing. Bids on materials and contracts may be found under tab 8. The two items I'd like to discuss this morning may be found on page 1 and are associated with the installation of water mains in the Vistantia subdivision. The first project listed is for the 24-inch approach main that will front the subdivision along 204th Street between Fort and Kansas, and the second project is for the internal mains. The low bid for both projects was over the engineer estimate by approximately 27% and 6% respectively. We reached out to the bidders to get a feel for what may have impacted the bids, in which we were told that an increase in backlog work, labor shortages, and increased material costs were factors. For both projects, the bids were within 2 to 3% of each other. The developer was informed of the bids and has requested the district move forward with awarding both projects. Both projects are 100% funded by the developer, and the low bid on each is recommended for approval. And that's all I planned on discussing this morning, unless you have any questions.
One quick follow-up. They said it was because of the backlog of work?
Correct.
I know there's a lot of construction going on in Omaha, and I read where Omaha's construction activity is one of the highest in the country. Is that driving up prices for all our projects?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily say for all of our projects. As you have seen, electrical has really been impacted. Last month, I brought a project to the board where we were, as part of the Florence capital improvement, where we were renovating the low-service pump station. That was heavily electrical, and that was about 25% over the engineer's estimate, and we have seen that across this whole area associated with that. In general, it's tight. I mean, it's a tight market. It's a good time to be a contractor, let's just put it that way. It's a very good time to be a contractor.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Marketing. No, services and extensions, my bad.
Tab 10. Good morning, Corey O'Brien, Vice President, Engineering and Construction. Tab 10, we have our main extensions letter this month. And you may have noticed we changed the format just a little bit again. We kept the map on the first page. We got rid of some of the pie charts and reformatted a little bit of the dialogue on pages 2 and 3. And I think this is the format we'll use going forward. But certainly if you have any comments or further changes you want, please share those with us. This month we have 5 projects in total, 4 gas and 1 water. The impact of the projects are significant. On the gas side, we have 525 single residence lots, 3 multi-residence lots, and 12 commercial lots. And on the water side, the single project represents 301 single residence lots. On page 2, you'll see our 4 gas main extensions for the month. I'm just going to kind of summarize them in my comments. Each of the 4 projects has management is recommending an oversizing of a segment of main from 2 to 4 inch. On 3 of the 4 projects, that oversizing is estimated to cost the district about $25,000 per project. The other project will be a little bit more, and the estimate of district cost is about $41,000. Projects 3 and 4 both have a deficiency associated with them, and the developers for both projects have agreed to pay those deficiencies. On the last page, you'll see our 1 water project for the month. It is a large project, but it is entirely funded by the developer, so no direct district cost. Any questions?
Just one follow-up. I appreciate this map. It really puts it in perspective. One other thing that would be helpful for me is when you go back to the detail of the project, like on project number 1, where you have project number GP 2502, could you, in smaller print, put down there the voting district that it's in?
Sure.
Just so it ties back to the map, but you can look at it and say, well, that's in my district or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be glad to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Jason. Marketing and consumer information.
Good morning, I'm Jason Stanek, Director of Marketing and Contractor Services. Under tab 11, you'll find a summary of the 2020 marketing programs, as well as a tabulated listing of the program budget. As a reminder, these programs are funded jointly through revenue of Northern Natural Gas and the district, and an allocation of that amount is shown at the bottom of the table. I'd like to highlight a couple of the programs we've worked on this past year and take a look going into 2020. So the first program on the screen is our multifamily program. This is a marketing program we started back in about 2015. and it's to incent developers to use natural gas in multifamily complexes. The one shown here is called Broadmoor 63, which is at 2323 South 63rd Street, so just right by our operations center. This is a unique project. It's 238 apartment buildings or apartment units in a single building, and the developer used gas furnaces and individual gas meters. So you can see in the bottom two pictures, we had to get creative with how we set those meters up. We didn't have a lot of wall space like we typically do on apartment units, so engineering, field service did a great job getting those in, making them compact, and developer was really happy with that outcome. In addition to new development buildings, we've seen an increase in redevelopment. So the two projects listed here, Fitzgerald Building on 1624 Cumming and the Foundry Lofts at 1039 South 21st Street, those were both vacant buildings, and we were able to work with each of those developers to incent them to use natural gas. The Fitzgerald Building, they installed both furnaces and water heaters, and the Foundry Lofts, we were able to get them to put in furnaces and ranges. Moving on to CNG. It was a good 2019 for CNG. We saw the operation of the Metro station go online in May of 2019. And moving forward, at total build-out, Metro will have 33 CNG buses, including 10 of the rapid transit buses, which is the orbit system. They're currently building the stops along Dodge Street you might have seen. And the picture on the upper right is one of the new orbit buses that they will be using. Additionally, FCC Environmental was awarded the City of Omaha trash contract just this past August. And so construction of their station will begin next year. We're currently working with them on site locations in our service territory. And at total build out, they will be using 75 refuse trucks. Just a quick overview of our CNG. Some of this might be kind of small to read, but I've got a list of our partnerships. So we've got a pretty solid listing here: UPS, Metro Community College, cities of Omaha and La Vista, quite a few others that are all currently using CNG in their fleets. And then a breakdown of some of the environmental benefits we've seen since our station at 53rd and L became operational in 2011. Displaced nearly 186,000 barrels of oil, and CO2 reductions, about 19,000 tons. The CO2 buses are about 25%, the CNG buses have about 25% less CO2 emissions than diesel. And then overall, this is a graph showing our stations and dispensing since 2011, when, like I said, we opened our first station at 53rd and L Street in 2011, and what we're projecting through 2021 once Metro and FCC are fully operational. So at total build out at the end of 2021, we're going to be right around 2.5 million gallons equivalent of CNG dispensed, which equates to just under 4,000, or right about 4,000 homes annually of gas load. Just to kind of put that in reference, on a typical year, we might get application for about 1,600 homes, so that's a fairly good gas load. Finally, the last project I want to talk about is our Habitat for Humanity. MED's been partnering with Habitat since 2013 in various ways. Habitat's one of the highest volume home builders in the state, so I don't think a lot of people realize that. They do about 50 homes annually, and we've worked with them to incent them to install natural gas furnaces, water heaters, stoves this year, and then also provide gas piping for dryer hookups. And in addition, in the past year, or just recently, a team of MED employees participated in the 2019 Builder Blitz program, so there's a couple photos there. I think there was 13 or 14 of us out there that helped frame that house on the first day. It was a really great opportunity for all of us to get out there, and some of us didn't know what we were doing the best, but we got through it. And it was hotter than heck, but it was a really good effort. And then we also had our water wagon out there for the workers, so overall, really great experience for the district. Does anybody have any questions on any of the items? Yeah, go ahead.
Jason, could you, I don't know if I've got this, could you address the residential gas dryer and range rebate program? I think that's a wonderful program, and I don't think people know enough about it.
Yeah, so we started the gas dryer program about 3 years ago. So basically, anybody purchasing a gas dryer, a new or replacing, if they have one, replacing it, we give a rebate for that. We've added stoves this coming year. We're really focusing on end use of natural gas in homes. So whether somebody is converting from electric to gas, we want to incent that. But we also realize that just because they have a gas dryer now, it doesn't mean if they're going to purchase a new one, it's going to be gas. So we want to incent those customers as well to buy gas again.
And how do they go about utilizing this program? I know it's a credit that's applied to the bill.
Yes,
So
correct.
can you give us a few details on
Yeah, so we've got rebates on our website, and we've done bill stuffers in the past, and we saw a big spike last time we did that. So when we kick off these programs in January, we probably should look at doing something like that again.
I would really encourage you
Yeah.
to get the information out there for folks so they know how to take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's a really good rebate, and the numbers seem low that we get, so it's just getting the word out there. And we've worked with Furniture Mart and some of the Lowe's and Home Depots to try to get that out, but with the national stores, it's a little more difficult. But with the Furniture Mart, they've been more receptive to having that literature there.
Well, I know last year it was $300 credit on your bill if you bought a dryer. What is it
Yeah.
this year?
We've modified the program. It's going to be $200 for a dryer and $200 for a stove.
Okay.
And
Is that for
bill
the
credit.
year?
What's that?
Is that for the year, $200 with, or is that just a cash rebate?
It's applied to your bill.
Yeah,
So
it's a
if your
bill
bill is
credit.
$100 and some dollars a month, then you'll get a credit that month and the next month.
One follow-up question, will MUD install the line if they need a new gas line to go with the
We
gas
can, yeah.
dryer?
If they call for an estimate, we can provide that for them.
And what do we charge for that?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I'd maybe.
Is it
Mike-
cheaper than going
Mike
to
Hall?
a contractor?
T&M?
It is cheaper than going to a general contractor? See, that's another thing I think our customers should know, that we stand ready to do that.
Well, and MUD knows what they're doing with the gas line, so I certainly wouldn't have any hesitation to have them installing that.
Early on in our genesis of the dryer program, probably 6 or 7 years ago, we did tie in installation of the fuel line with it. But it became a little difficult because, if you got to go up a couple floors or some of that, because we were kind of eating the cost of installing the line. So this way, we just incent them that money, and if they can use that to hire a plumber or have us come out and do it, that'll help offset that.
Thank you.
One other follow-up question on the rain sensor rebate. Good point too. How much is that rebate that we pay?
It's $50.
Same thing goes against your bill?
Yeah, it's a bill credit.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've been doing that program for 4 or 5 years now, and it seems to be pretty steady each year, so.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Thank you. Good partnerships there. Personnel. Bonnie.
Good morning. Happy December. I'm Bonnie Savine, Vice President of Human Resources, and I'll begin with a brief recap of employee counts for the month end of November 2018 and 2019. At the end of October 2018, we had 808 regular full-time employees and 7 regular part-time employees for a total of 815 regular employees. And at the end of 2019's October month, we had 810 regular full-time employees and 4 regular part-time for 816 regular employees. We do still have 2 temporary employees on staff. And we do have a number of employees that will be starting over the next 4 weeks. So more to come next month. Now behind tab 12, you will find the wage and/or salary increase and ratifications letter. Human Resources is recommending that the Board of Directors approve wage or salary increases for 13 employees this month. 11 employees are being promoted into OAC jobs. 5 of those are promoted into posted positions, and 6 of those promoted by natural job progression within their family. 2 additional employees, 1 OAC and 1 SPA, are promoted in SPA jobs. And the last section of the letter summarizes a request to ratify the new hire salaries of 2 employees, 2 SPA employees. Any questions?
Bonnie?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, on item number 3, there are 6 employees that are all being promoted from the same job to the same job. Is that unusual to have that cluster of group or people, or were they all the same training class? Or what?
They are the same training class, and so once they complete all of the required training, testing, and demonstrate proficiency within their position, then they are recommended for that next job.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I have one other question, and it may better be directed to Sue. I noticed in the monthly report that the call center, the answered, jumped to 94%. And we had a lot of discussion the past few months. In the summer it was 87%, so it's jumped to 94%.
Right.
And I was wondering, is that a reflection of staffing? How's our staffing in the customer service?
Well, I can at least speak to 7 new customer service clerks that we will be starting a training class for on January 6th. So those are coming, and that will fill the current vacancies within the division. I know that we also, come on, Sue, come on. We did also have a handful of staff that moved from downtown back out to the call center when downtown lobby closed. Come on in, Sue.
Good morning, Sue Lobsiger, Vice President for Information Technology and Customer Service. Thank you for your question. Yes, we are getting ready to onboard some new CSRs that will start at the beginning of the year. We'll start a training program. But I think a number of factors have contributed to the changes in the statistics that you're seeing from summer to now. One is just call volume. But I think what Shallon Buffin, the Director for Customer Service, has done in that role is a few different things from a leadership perspective. One is separating what we had a supervisor that was doing both productivity and supervising staff. We split that so we can focus on productivity and scheduling. And so in that role, we've really taken a look at when peak calls come and have adjusted scheduling accordingly, and then spent quite a bit of time with staff and supporting them and setting expectations. So I think between moving the staff out from credit services, so we added that staff, we've taken care of some leadership changes and refocused efforts on where peak needs are. So I think all those things have contributed to those changes.
That's great. Now, when the new training class starts in January for the new employees, how long is the training last?
So it's about 12 weeks. So they'll be, they go through training and then they buddy up with other CSRs, and then they'll be pretty much ready in the March timeframe.
Okay, well, thank you. And good focus, good improvement.
Thank you.
Sue, don't leave. Just a quick question. I know that can be a very challenging job. Can you give me some idea what the turnover rate is?
So what we've seen since summer has been not a lot. There's been 2, I think, that happened in October, and they were, one left the company and one took another position. So yeah, well, it hasn't been.
That seems like a really low number. That's to your credit, certainly.
Right, we'll have to see over the longer term, but.
Good, well, thank you.
But, you know, I also see it as, we want to encourage folks within.
Well, once you get them
within the
trained and they're doing
district,
a good
right?
job,
So
you don't want to
there's-
lose them.
Is that dilemma, so. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions on the letter? other than that. Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Where are we?
Mark Mendenhall, JNL tab 13.
Good morning. Mark
Morning.
Mendenhall, Senior Vice President, General Counsel of the district. Behind tab 13, you will see a recommendation from management to have this board approve an expansion of the district's boundaries relative to several of your specific subdivisions. These additions are truly necessary for the upcoming primaries for several of your subdivisions, and so after today's actions, my next steps will be communicating these new maps to both the Douglas County Election Commission as well as the Nebraska Secretary of State. On the overhead map, you'll just see the district-wide, or on the overhead screens, you'll just see the district-wide map, which indicates, I believe, there's approximately 36 additional residential or commercial subdivisions that I am asking be included in our district-wide map. This brings in approximately 950 residential customers and 40 commercial customers. In your binders, you will find specific subdivision maps for your respective subdivisions. And if there are any questions?
Thank you, Mark. I have one question.
Yes,
You
sir.
said you're going to be communicating this to the Election Commission and Secretary of State.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any plans, or how do we communicate this to the actual residents that they will now be taken over in part of MUD?
Good questions. And so when we are providing new services to those folks, then that's where that communication takes place. So there'll be either a communication when we're adding water services or gas services to those folks. The communications will start early on from the design engineering department, for example, when we're working with the developers, either the residential or the commercial developers, to lay new mains and connect new services to those residences or those commercial
Are they
subdivisions.
currently customers of the district right now, and we're just expanding to make them formal customers?
I can't speak to whether or not each of these are. Some of these are undeveloped, and some are developed. And so I would say those, and I can give you, I guess, a better, for example, let's say number 7, that's Anchor Point Subdivision. Anchor Point Subdivision would be found, let's find whose it is. Director Friend, that is in your subdivision, so that is north, and those look to be existing residential customers within a new subdivision, which I don't think I'm going out on a limb too far, but I would believe that those would be existing homes that have already been built. I don't know if there are folks living in them yet, but they would be connected to our system, and so there would be communications to those folks that they are already receiving our services. So that would be an example of an existing subdivision that we are already serving.
It just seems like we ought to have some kind of communication to those customers, say, hey, welcome to the district, you're now formal customers, you can vote and everything.
You bet. Great idea. Any other questions? Without any questions, I would ask the board's and the chair's indulgence for a few minutes before we turn to tabs 14 and 15 relative to the budget and the proposed increases of pass-through costs. You may recall this board's action from last month, the gas rate realignment letter, which sought to separate certain components of the gas commodity charges, including, well, specifically the transportation demand charges. A transportation demand charge is essentially a charge the district pays to our transporter, and it happens to be Northern Natural Gas. That charge is found in what's called Gas Rate Schedule GCA. And GCA is Gas Cost Adjustment, and that's just a rate schedule that applies to all firm and interruptible customers. So the November action sought to pull out that transportation charge to make it more transparent on what the district is paying for a transportation charge relative to the gas costs, separate from our operating expenditures, our capital expenditures, and our debt service costs. And so maybe you're not, but maybe you've asked yourself why we would be, or I would be asking this board, if you are inclined to approve the next steps here, why you'd be undertaking a resolution, to approve a resolution to authorize the district to increase those costs. Well, that's really my decision, and it was because I felt that was the most appropriate action based upon our appropriate delegation of authorities. And so if that helps explain the next steps, then I'll turn it over to Ms. Patterson and Mr. Shafford.
Let me just add onto that two things.
Yes.
The fact that MUD can control costs, capital costs, expenditures, O&M, all of that. That's one thing that we can control and announce to the public that, we're managing our costs aggressively. The gas cost, like Jim Knight has told us many times, is very volatile depending on the market conditions, the NYMEX, the futures, and all that. Now that we've approved Northern Natural to be a gas pass-through as well, that becomes part of the gas cost. So we do not control the Northern Natural gas costs. We do not control the market price of gas, but we do collect the costs. And so we need to make sure that the public knows that we're aggressively controlling our costs, but these are pass-throughs because they're outside of our control. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission regulates Northern Natural's rates, and they have a pending rate proceeding. That'll probably be adjusted downward as a result of that proceeding. And who knows exactly what the market's going to do for natural gas. So those are legitimately pass-through costs, which I think we need to make sure. Now, the one thing I think we need to be aware of and be a little concerned about is our message to our customers, because we have been consistently telling our customers the CSO, the sewer charge costs that are on our bill, are not our costs either. We're just collecting it. Now we're adding another component of that, the gas costs in Northern Natural. It's not our control, but we're collecting it. So, we just have to make sure that our message clarifies all that and separates what we control and what is controlled by the market or the city through the sewer. I just think we need to, this adds another couple components to our message about the sewer. So maybe a gas insert or something like that to reinforce our position.
Very well said, Director McGowan, and I would just add that in the coming months, maybe in January or February, depending upon how the agendas for those board meetings go, I'll look forward to providing, with the assistance of Mr. Knight, an update on that action that is currently before the FERC in Washington, D.C. So with that, thank you.
We will now begin the public hearing on the district's 2020 gas and water budget. Senior Vice President Joseph Shaffert, along with Ms. Geneva Patterson, Manager of Rates and Regulatory Affairs, will provide a presentation on the budget, which will include a review of the gas rate increase and a discussion about water rates. At its there is no gas rate increase, I might add. At its conclusion, we will invite any members of the public who are interested to share any comments they may have. Mr. Shaffert, please take over. Or Geneva.
Good morning. I'm Geneva Patterson, Manager of Rates and Regulatory Affairs for the district, and I'll be presenting this year's rate proposal for the 2020 budget year. You'll find the information related to this presentation behind tab number 14. I'll begin with water. This time last year, we established the need to increase the rate of water main replacement from 7 miles a year to 10 miles per year, with 1,182 of our 2,962 miles of water mains being cast iron and over 500 main breaks per year. The need is to focus on those critical miles that require our attention. To that end, we established a water infrastructure replacement component to our commodity rate. That rate was approved this time last year and implemented in 2 phases. Phase 1 was implemented on July 1st, 2019. Phase 2 will be implemented January 2nd, 2020. With the second phase of last year's increase starting next month, no additional increase to the water commodity rate is being proposed at this time, nor is there any increase being proposed to the fixed water infrastructure replacement charge or the water service charge. The previously approved increase equates to $1.69 a month for the average residential customer, or $20.33 per year. This chart depicts the average residential customer's budgeted bills for both 2019 and 2020 based on normal weather. The bar on the left represents the budgeted annual bill for 2019, and the bar on the right represents the budgeted annual bill for 2020. At the very bottom of each bar, you'll notice that we project a slight decrease in water usage from 106 CCF in 2019 to 105 CCF in 2020. We've mentioned for several years now that water usage is declining, and that downward trend continues as depicted here. Starting with the blue sections at the bottom and working our way to the top, we see that service charges and fixed water infrastructure replacement charges are the same from year to year. The thin yellow section represents the 2% of water sales that we're required by statute to remit to the cities for all water sales inside city limits. That increases slightly due to the increase in the commodity component of water infrastructure replacement from 2019 to 2020, represented by the green section at the top of each bar. The purple section is the base commodity charge paid for water consumed. And as previously stated, usage continues to decline, and that's reflected in the purple section with that decline from $143 per year to $141 per year. Overall, the annual residential customers' budgeted bill is expected to increase from $359.15 in 2019 to $379.48 in 2020. And again, that's a change of $20.33 per year, or $1.69 per month. So the water revenue generated in 2020 supports our efforts to focus on those critical miles of water main repairs and replacements that we've got to get after. This slide shows what revenue is contributed to infrastructure by customer class in comparison to the water usage by customer class. It shows that each customer class contributes a fair amount toward infrastructure replacement in comparison to the usage by customer class. Our current rate philosophy has been to increase the variable component of the rate, which makes the contribution even more balanced as time goes on. Each January, the district participates in the Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Annual Utility Survey. The red bar on this slide shows how we compare to our peers in this national water bill comparison, with bills that were calculated for 10 CCFs of water using January 2019 water rates. Of this year's 41 participants, our rates are the 14th lowest. You will also notice a green bar on the chart, which was not part of the survey. We added that to the chart to show where we might rank with the rates that go into effect starting in January 2020. Now, that assumes that none of the other survey participants have rate increases, which I don't believe would be likely. But under these assumptions, we move from 14 out of 41 to a ranking of 19 out of 41, which still places us among the water utilities in the lower half of the survey participants. On the gas side, we are...
Excuse me, can I interrupt?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm going to ask a question I've asked for several months now. Have we heard from the large volume customers? Is there going to be any surprise with this rate going into effect, the 12% January 1st, like last year where they said we had no idea, and they come back, they want us to adjust it and everything else? I know we've talked to them. I don't know if anyone's here from the large volume customers. I don't see any, but has there been any response or feedback from them?
Well, we did meet with them. We've had several meetings over the course of this past year since last year's rate increase. We met with them to go over how our rates are structured, what their contribution is. And since we met, I think we last met in May or June, I have not heard any more follow-up from any of our large water customers. Their feedback was that their major discomfort was that they did not have enough time to prepare for the then proposed increase, and that they did seem to be more comfortable with the delayed phased-in approach. So to my knowledge, I am not aware of any continued.
I'll make Dave DeBoer, Senior Vice President, Chief Operator. Just to add to that, again, Director McGowan, our utilization engineer, Sarah Jones, did reach out in a mailing yesterday to the large volume group. That includes our Schedule C and our Schedule 3 customers, most of which are already included in that grouping of customers that targeted our rate increase last year.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, really quick, adding to what Mike said, in slide 4, and I know we've discussed this, the W3 large industrial users.
I know which one you're talking about.
This is based on the 2020 rate increase, the 19% from last year. The W3 users, we still see that total consumption for the W3 users is 7.7%, while the total contribution for water infrastructure is only 2.9%. And I appreciate the fact that we've had good discussions with those users, but as I've shared with you, I hope in the years to come that disparity can be addressed with regard to, we see residential users paying a greater proportion based on what they consume versus what they contribute to the infrastructure replacement. I just look forward to those discussions in the next couple of years to address that discrepancy.
Yes, excellent point. And just to piggyback on that, it's also, I think, further exacerbated by the fact that a lot of the large volume customers, critical partnerships that we have with them, but at the same time, those are also the same partnerships that inherently need the reliability for that particular user group. So again, on a contribution basis, it just affirms your points you're making, Director Begley. And one of the things that Joe and I and Geneva have all talked about is as future rate increases come into effect, down the road for the next several years, those percentages will close the gap between these two rate classifications.
Prior to the 19% increase last year, do we know what that, it's now, their water usage has remained 7.7%. Their contribution after the rate increase last year is 2.9%. Do we know what that contribution was prior to the rate increase?
We've got that statistic.
I have that information, and I'll be happy to send it to you. I don't have it with me today.
Okay.
Director Begley makes such a good point. I don't believe that our residential customers should be in the position of subsidizing as we like to call them, our large water use partners. It's just not appropriate, and they should certainly step up to the plate and do their share.
That's very true, but we have to be careful because those large volume users spend a lot of money and pay us a lot of revenues for their water usage. They're big volume users, and they're contributing some fixed costs that if we don't be careful and they leave us, that leaves a lot of fixed costs back on our customers. So it's a delicate balance.
Tell me where they're going to go.
I don't know. But
Well, let me know when they do.
If you lose one, Gwen, you lose one, it's a big impact.
I can appreciate that, and I think if they're so concerned, building on a point that you made, they would be here.
If I may interject, Mark Doyle, thank you for the discussion, and I'm hearing all sides of this, but I want to commend staff for the focus on this. I mean, we had to discover this. I don't know how we got into this position, and I'm not looking back, but it takes deep analysis and critical focus on, we're talking critical mains. This also takes critical focus. I believe when you bring to light information that most reasonable people would agree on, I don't think we have a disagreement with these customers because you only need to go to a water main break at a packing plant when the business is disrupted and the mains are this old to know that this really is about not surprising them, and we've done a good job now of having that discussion, but our focus is turning to, please expect more reasonable recurring changes in the future, and it's all about reliability and keeping their businesses in operation, but it's also about being fair to the larger critical mass. The facts are the facts, and as a management team, we're going to do everything we can to bring them up and have the difficult discussions, but we will do a better job of forward communications in the future. We will never argue that. Right, Dave?
Very good.
And Geneva, nice work, and the focus has been extreme, and I'm really happy with the way things are being talked about here, because they're not going to step up on their own if, I mean, come on, right?
True.
Okay.
So
and
true.
I want to commend those customers for the way they've reacted and worked with us since this occurred last year at about this time. The holidays weren't as happy for me. So I have to really take hats off to the staff and to the board for supporting this. This is not easy. These type of increases are not easy. They shouldn't be required because we should have been doing this for a long time. But we have to get after this infrastructure issue, and I feel like down in Lincoln, it's worse than I thought. So, but we're not going to run from it, and we're going to take care of it and make this utility sustainable for the next 100 years. And by Lincoln, I meant football, not the city of Lincoln. Right? Well,
Yes.
I got to watch what I say.
On the gas side, we are projecting that the average residential customer will see an increase to their gas bills that equates to $1.28 per month. The increase is driven by a projected higher cost of gas, as well as an increase in firm transportation charges. No increase is being requested to the district's gas commodity rate, gas service charge, or gas infrastructure replacement charge. There will be no bond financing in 2020, and gas infrastructure replacement will be funded by operating cash. Of our 2,857 miles of gas mains, 253 of those miles are cast iron, and with a replacement rate of 40 miles per year, we're on target to complete cast iron replacement by 2027. Like the chart presented for water, this bar chart compares the various components of the average residential gas customer's budgeted annual charges for 2019 to 2020. Again, starting at the bottom of the chart and working our way up, you'll see that for each year, the average residential customer uses 781 therms of gas. The bar on the left represents 2019, and that's at an annual cost of $560.48 versus 2020's annual cost of $575.89, an increase of $15.41 per year, or $1.28 a month. The service charge, infrastructure replacement charge, and the district's base commodity charges all remain unchanged. The increases show up in the green sections, which represent the cost of gas and the transportation demand, those pass-through costs. So again, we participated in Memphis Gas, Light, and Water's National Comparison Survey on the gas side. The red bar represents the district's charges for 200 CCFs of gas calculated with January 2019's gas rates. We are the 5th lowest of the 41 gas survey participants this year. The green bar was added to show where we would rank using 2020's projected gas rates. And again, that assumes that none of the other survey participants have rate increases, which again, I would not expect. And it also demonstrates the impact of gas costs. 2019's actual gas costs were higher due to the colder temperatures, while 2020's budget is based on normal weather conditions. This final graph combines the gas and water projections for the average residential customer. In total, their overall gas and water combined charges will increase by $35.74 a year, or $2.98 a month. And if there are no questions at this time, I'll turn it over to Joe to complete the budget.
I have one question. You said our average residential bill will increase by $1.28 because of the pass-through costs. We're not sure of that, though. This is what our projection is. Gas prices, as you just said, are projected this year to be based on normal weather. Last year's colder than normal, prices were higher.
Right.
We see that maybe prices will be lower on the gas side. So there's a chance, and we don't know, that the reduction in gas prices can offset some or most of that northern natural gas increased cost, and our customers won't be paying that $1.28. On the flip side, if it turns out to be really cold and gas prices spike, it could be more than $1.28. So we got to be careful on our message to our customers. I think this board has to realize these pass-through costs are not controlled by us, but yet our rates are and our bills are. And so we have to communicate that to our customers, and we cannot be derelict in our efforts to collect the money that this pass-through actually costs the company. We cannot control the gas costs, cannot control northern natural costs, but we have to collect and pay those bills, so our customers have to pay those pass-through costs, and we have to communicate to them that we're doing the best we can to keep those costs under control with whatever control we have. But on the other side, on our operating costs, we're controlling those very well, zero increase. So we got to be careful, but this board needs to recognize and approve these pass-through costs, because we have to pay those costs regardless, and our customers have to understand what that means.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Good morning, Joe Shappard. I serve as the Chief Financial Officer for the district. So I'll be presenting the balance of what is behind tab 14 and kind of translating what Geneva just described into the impact on financials. So just to give you some perspective on kind of the order of magnitude of the spending that we're talking about between both on the gas and water side is this pie chart. So you can see it's $266.9 million split between the various pieces of the pie that you see. It shouldn't be a big surprise that payroll and benefit costs are an enormous part of our costs, like they are for most businesses. The reason for the dotted line in that piece of the pie is that since we self-perform work, a portion of those costs are actually capitalized to projects. That's all the significance of that is. The capital is pretty self-explanatory. The other O&M slice relates to things like travel, memberships, electric power, chemicals at the water plants, et cetera. That gives you a sense for the type of spending we have. The other point to make that is not reflected on these pie charts, and it speaks a little bit to what Director McGowan was talking about, gas purchase costs are projected to be $95 million in 2020, again, a pass-through. And the other thing that's not reflected on here, because they effectively represent prior decisions on the part of the board, is debt service costs on the bonds outstanding. That's an additional $22.6 million in 2020. So now in terms of some items that are kind of shared between both sides of the business, because obviously we have a common pay structure and a common benefit structure amongst both sides of the business. You can see a 2.25% pay increase for both the SPA as well as the OAC, or the organized employees. Those are consistent with the language in the labor agreement that is set to expire March 31st of 2023. So the board may recall 2021 and 2022 have these same 2.25% wage increases included therein. In terms of reflecting the funding of the promises to employees, that's the pension and the other post-employment benefits, AKA retiree medical. Just to talk about pension for a second, the budget includes $13.5 million in contribution, the district contribution related to the pension plan. And just a brief recap, at the end of 2018, the pension plan was 86.5% funded, very healthy funding. Many of our fellow agencies in the city would be envious of that funding level. The contribution in 2019 by the district is going to be $12.3 million. There's two reasons for the increase to 13.5. The first reason is that we lowered the return assumption from 7 to 6.9%. That results in about another $600,000 of contribution. And then every year we try to do a little bit more than the annual required contribution to try to continue to chip away at that unfunded liability and raise that funded percent. So that's the reason for the increase. On the other post-employment benefit side, or the retiree medical, Historically, prior to the establishment of the OPEB trust at the end of 15, the only contributions the district made were funding retiree medical claims as they came about. And in 2015, we established a trust and actually began making contributions to the trust. So now the annual cost, this $13.5 million, is actually divided between retiree claims and contributions to the trust. Now, since we started so late, that funding percentage I talked about per pension is obviously lower for the OPEB side. It's at 18.1% at the end of 18, and we will continue to contribute to grow that. Since 2018, we have contributed at least 100% of the annual required contribution per the actuaries' estimates. We did in 18, 19, and we're planning to for 20, so we're going to continue to chip away and raise that funding percent. But we appreciate the board's support in that endeavor. We make a promise to employees. We think that's the right vehicle to fulfill that promise. Now, getting into the water operations.
Joe, can I interrupt
Yes,
again?
sir.
Sorry. On the pension and OPEB funding, it's split equitably between the gas and water.
Yes.
What's our staffing ratio between total staff gas and total staff water? And should it be equitably, or should it be based on how many staff are on the water, how many staff on the gas?
And that's effectively what we're talking about, Mike, when we say equitably. It's based on payroll for both sides. The thing that does make it difficult is, as you might imagine, many of us are, what we call shared employees.
Yeah.
In fact, most of us are shared employees, so there's a lot of allocating involved. But it's roughly 50-50, 52-48, something like that.
Close.
But it's absolutely what you're talking about.
Okay.
That's how we're defining equitably.
Okay, thank you.
So now looking at the water operations side on the revenue side, and some of this is repetitive to what Ms. Patterson just spoke of. So no additional rate increase requested of the board at this point. The previously approved rate increase to commodity does result in an extra $20 per year or of cost for the average residential customer, or $1.69 a month, directed entirely to the ramp-up of infrastructure replacement. We'll exit 2019 with about 1,180 miles of cast iron mains remaining, so we have our work cut out for us. We have many years' worth of work there. We're placing heavy focus on identifying the most critical mains in terms of deciding the order of attack and how we replace these. The kind of constant reminder that we have as to the status of our infrastructure are the number of main breaks we have every year, water main breaks. So through the end of November, we had 524 water main breaks this year, all of which result in disruption to our customer and cost. That number, by the way, for the full year last year was less than that. It was actually, I believe, 491 for all of last year. So if we have an average number of main breaks in the month of December, 2019 will be a 10-year high in terms of water main breaks, despite a lot of smart people working very hard on this topic. The fact is we have old infrastructure, and we need to change the trajectory at which the water main, the rate of increase flattens and then declines. And we're working hard on that. I assure you, engineers are working harder than the accountants because they know how to do that better than the accountants. So the other point is we assume 0.8% customer growth. That's about what we experience. That results in about 1,700 customers. On the expenditure side, you can see capital spending is up by about $13.8 million, 2020 budget versus 2019 budget. We talked about all the detail in November. The biggest reason for this is the ramp up in cast iron main replacement. We're going from 10 miles in 19 to 13 miles in 2020. The other thing we're acknowledging is that the rate per mile to replace it is actually about 1.5, whereas last year's budget showed about 1.3. So we've got both a ramp up going on and an increase in cost per mile. Again, doing our best to chip away at that cost and lower that, but that's about what we're experiencing right now. The other significant increase is all the other main types. When you hear about all these new subdivisions going in, the good news is, from a gross perspective, so these contract mains, which are subdivision mains, and the pioneer mains, which are often the approach mains to subdivisions, those are going up between the two by 4.6 year over year. The good news is developers pay for that. The other increase is to relocation mains, which we generally pay for because they're in public right away. Finally, there's $13.1 million of Florence financing that is funded via the bond that was issued in 2018. We'll exit 2020 with about $8.1 million of proceeds remaining, which we expect to consume by the middle of 2021. So in terms of translating this to a revenue and expense statement for the water side, You can see that net income actually increases from 22.8 million to 32.6 year over year. And again, the comparative column is not 2019 budget, it's 2019 projection, which is 9 months of actual and 3 months of projection, which is typically budget, unless we know differently. The biggest increase, of course, is the 14.5 million of revenue, driven in part by these previously approved rate increases. But the other thing that's contributing to that is an assumption that will return to normal on the water side. As you know, we had a very, very wet 2019, which drove down water volumes. So about 4 million of that increase is to return to normal. It's interesting when you look at rainfall statistics. Through the month of October, we're 32% above normal, whatever normal means in Omaha, Nebraska, an average of abnormal, I guess. As you move down the page, I talked about revenue. You can see expenses are up by 3.7 million. The biggest contributor is operating and maintenance. That's where our people costs are. So as a result of the headcount actions that you saw in the presentation in November, wages and benefit costs are up district-wide by about 3.6 million. Some of that gets capitalized to the tune of about 500,000 or 600,000, leaving about 3 million that hits O&M, split roughly ratably between, because that's how payroll works, Mr. McGowan. So about 1.5 million of that 2.4 is wages and benefits. And the other big contributor to that increase is when you return water volumes to normal volumes, you have more treatment expenses at the water plant. So that's the bulk of the remainder. Depreciation and amortization is up because your capital's up, like we've talked about. Interest expense is actually down because as we pay down the bonds, you have less principal you're paying interest on. And then finally, interest income is down a little bit because as our cash balances decline, we have less investable cash, which drives your interest expense down. So now the punchline is cash flow for the water operations. You can see that we project to end 2019 with unrestricted cash of 88.6 million on the water side. Then the green bars are the contributors, starting with net income from the prior schedule. The reason you add back depreciation and amortization, it's a non-cash expense that's deducted to derive net income. And then the contributions box is what I talked about earlier from developers, and then also impact fees that are collected as we add new water meters. The reds are all the declines. So capital expenditure of 59.3 million. That is net of what we pay for out of the bond at Florence, netted down for that. And then debt service of 13.2. That's just principal payments because the interest is already picked up for the most part when you derive net income, because it's deducted to derive net income. Results in unrestricted cash of 87.5 million. You are seeing a drop in unrestricted cash of about 1.1 million. We believe we continue to retain sufficient liquidity, so we're knowingly spending down cash. That's a decision. On the gas operation side, looking at the revenue components first, again, as Geneva mentioned, a $1.28 per month increase to the average residential customer, or $16 a year, due to the pass-through costs, again, transportation costs, as well as assumed increase in cost of gas. Director McGowan makes a great point. It's a commodity, and you're trying to predict what it's going to do. And reality sometimes is different than predictions, but that's what we predict it's going to do. Additionally, the budget reflects a spend down of 7.6 million of operating cash. As the board is aware, we've come off of 2 pretty cold winters, which drove demand for our product, which resulted in an increase in our cash reserves. Because of that, we're going to spend it down. We think that's prudent while retaining sufficient liquidity to meet the business needs. But again, a knowing, intentional spend down of operating cash. And then finally, the same growth assumption on the gas side at 0.8%. On the expenditure side, capital is 62.3 million, which is 13.3 million, and more than the 2019 budget. The biggest increases, or the biggest explanations, I should say, for the 13.3 are an assumed or projected $10 million in spending of the new headquarters during 2020, and then an increase in construction vehicles of 2.5 million. The vehicle types are listed there. The board is aware we're adding a second infrastructure crew, so some of it is to equip that crew, and then other vehicles throughout the district. The other thing contributing to the increase is, I'll say, timing. There's a pretty thorough assessment going on right now of our equipment, and that resulted in a downturn in spending in 2019. Again, intentional, which some of that will come back in 2020. There is $21.1 million of gas infrastructure-related spending. The bond that we took out in 18 related to this initiative will be fully consumed by the end of the year. So the difference between GER spending, which is the capital I list there, the 21.1, and we have an additional debt service on the bonds of 2.2, totals $23.3 million. We have a rate component called gas infrastructure replacement that will generate $13.2 million. So the net spend out of cash related to GER is going to be $10.1 million in 2020. Again, translating this into revenue expense for the gas side, you can see that $33.4 million drops to $30.8 million in net income. Talk about the pieces and parts. You can see that net revenue, which is really the most meaningful statistic on this page, is dropping year over year. Obviously, you incur more gas costs, or these pass-through costs don't contribute to net revenue or margin. They are just a pass-through, as its name suggests. So despite some of those costs going up, again, we're reflecting a return to normal, except on the gas side, a return to normal is lower usage rather than what we were talking about on the water side. In fact, through September, we were 21.7% from a volume perspective higher than budget on the gas side. We don't, again, nobody can predict this, but the assumption has to be normal weather patterns, and that's what we assume. When you look at the expense side, they're actually down by $0.5 million, going from top to bottom. The operating and maintenance expense, that's the gas department side of the increased payroll I talked about previously. Depreciation and amortization, again, is driven by the extent to which capital grows, and it is growing. The reason that other net is down by $2.8 million is that the 2020 budget reflects a gain on some surplus property of $2 million. And then because revenue is lower, we have lower statutory payments, the 2%. So that's the bulk of the remainder. Interest income, again, is down on this side for the same reason it was in the water, lower investable cash balances. Bond proceeds are gone, and operating cash is dropping. So the punchline for the water or the gas side, from a cash flow perspective, we're starting the year with $133.3 million of unrestricted cash. The green bars talk about contributions, which again is the net income from the prior schedule. Add back depreciation and amortization for the same reason. A deduction of non-cash expense. And then you see capital expenditures of $62.3 million. Again, no bond funding, so all of that is funded out of operating cash, less the rate component related to gas infrastructure replacement. Debt service of $1.5 million. Again, principal payments on the gas bonds. Interest is already addressed in deriving net income. And then other miscellaneous is a slight uptick in natural gas stored in inventory. So we end 2020 with a projected unrestricted cash balance of $125.7 million. And then the associated gas and water rate letters that are behind tab 15 are the culmination of what Geneva and I just presented. So are there any questions?
I have a couple points, I guess, questions. First of all, I want to compliment Joe, you, Genevieve, your whole staff, and every employee in the company, because budgeting starts with every employee. It boils up. Every employee has to be focused on controlling their costs and managing their costs, and then everyone is part of that budgeting process. So it's a very lengthy and difficult process, as we've talked about before, but I have to compliment you and your staff and the employees. This is a very good, comprehensive, concise, easy to understand budget, and I thank you for that. So, then secondly, my point is, having gone through all this budget, the next important thing, I don't know if we want to talk about it here now or have a little discussion, is our press release and customer communication of this budget, because to me there are several points, I'll reiterate a couple of them, but there are several points that we need to make sure the public understands. Number one is there's a 0% increase on the cost controllable by MUD. We've done a good job of aggressively managing our costs and making sure that we aren't wasting money and our customers are paying a 0% increase. That's a big, important message. Secondly, market forces will determine the gas prices, and the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, will determine the Northern Natural Gas Transportation component. But we still have a responsibility to collect those revenues and pay the bill. And then the third thing is our customers, we want the customers to understand we do understand our role, and we do aggressively manage our controllable costs, reflected by the 0% increase. And so that we are aggressively managing our costs, and those have resulted in 0% increase, which is a big contributing factor of our bond rating being increased. We're one of the highest bond rated companies in the country because of our management of costs, management of our revenues. And I think that's another point we need to hammer home with our customers.
Great points, Director McGowan. We do have a draft of the press release you're describing. Other questions?
Thank you, Joe. Well, more of a comment than a question. First off, thank you so much for the hard work you do. I've always been able to rely on you to provide accurate information and give us the whole picture. I'm concerned about passing on this, as you call them, pass-through cost to the residential customer. And I'll use an example of my own bill. And we talk about a typical winter, which I really don't know what that is here in Nebraska, other than it's real cold. I'm on the budget plan. I like to know what I'm going to be paying out every month. And my budget cost went up $10 this month, $10 from every month last year. And we're going to look at adding on another $1.28 average, which, again, I'm not sure what average amounts to in actual dollars and cents that would be on my bill. But I really have a problem with this. It's probably going to be cold this winter, and people are going to probably have to pay more. I would suggest, with what we have currently, $125.7 million in reserve, that some of this pass-through could be absorbed rather than passing it on to the customer. I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate all your, as I said, all your hard work, but I really have to say it's another cost to the customer, and it's harder on them than it is on us, frankly.
Certainly, we remain very sensitive to what our services cost, and I guess, Director Howard, what I try to take comfort in is how we compare in national surveys, and we are very, very competitive, which I think is a tribute to how well this staff manages costs and how well the board assists us in that process. Coming off of a cold winter, I'm on the budget plan as well, so I'm seeing the same increase. It's just, you're right, we have an average of extremes in this climate. It's also what makes, activities like peak shave so important because of our usage patterns and how much they vary, unlike cities that have a dramatic or significant commercial or industrial load. So I'm not insensitive to your comments. It affects me as well, and I appreciate I'm probably in a better position to pay an increase to budget than some, but I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. I am very concerned about our continual minor costs to people, which add up to actual dollars and cents in their budget. Where does this show up on the bill? Is it under service costs? This proposed increase of $1.28.
Actually, it'll be in the cost of gas.
So in the actual gas rate, it'll increase again. So rather than my paying 140 some cents a month, I'm going to be paying 100, well, who knows? Because
but it's in the cost
again,
of
the
gas
average is what is the average.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I add, too, that I understand what you're saying, Director Howard, but we also have to be mindful to our customers for the long term. It wasn't that long ago that we had zero cash reserves. We were living day to day. Back when I got on the board in 2010, we had zero cash reserves. This team has done a great job of doing things to bolster that cash reserve and make sure we have money for a rainy day. Warren Buffett has $125 billion, Every business has cash reserves. And Joe and his team monitor those cash reserves every month to make sure that we're adequate. And if we get to a point where we have excess that they don't think we could need for the bond rating purposes and for our protection to our customers for that rainy day, if it's a warm winter or warm summer, both in the same, or wet summer in the same year, we're going to need those cash reserves to fall back on to avoid a huge rate increase in the future. Those cash reserves are very good. It's tempting to go and use them to avoid another cost like you're saying. We also have to be prudent for the long haul.
Yeah, Mike, it's really interesting that you'd say 2010 because we moved from zero in 2010 to apparently 125.7 million in 9 years. Somebody's doing something right, I would say. And we should be in a position to assist our customers rather than to add on to their cost.
Well, it gets to a point is what is the adequate cost, adequate level of the cash reserves? 2010, we had nothing. And we knew we were very, very short. We were just completely naked in case we needed cash for the future. And we had to do something, and Joe and the team at the time put steps in place to manage costs and have rates appropriate to build those cash reserves up. And at this point, yes, it sounds like a lot of money. But you got to remember, put in perspective what our total revenue budgeted. It's not that much, percent-wise. And if it's something that this team says we need for a rainy day, then I trust them and say, let's keep them at that level.
Joe, what impact do cash reserves have on our bond rating?
Well, as Director McGowan just alluded to, we had a recent upgrade from Standard & Poor's. We're the highest rated municipal natural gas utility in the country. They are not real, I'll say black and white when you directly ask them questions like that. Their position is almost, you can't have too much. Now, obviously we don't believe that. We look at cash from a day's cash on hand perspective, and what requires higher cash on the gas side is that in that equation is the cost of the natural gas. So, I mean, if you look at us spending $95 to $100 million a year on natural gas, again, you know, you try to convince them, we have a mechanism where we bill customers and we have some leverage over, we have very low bad debt, let's put it that way. But with that said, that's a fundamental measure by credit rating agencies of liquidity, is days cash on hand, which includes cost of gas. So the recent uptick in the grade will save us over the life of a bond probably $600,000 roughly. And, you know, again, to the long-term comment, now that saves our customers money, and it looks like we will have bond financing very likely when we come to terms with what we'll ultimately do with the LNG and the rest of the peak shave assets. But it's a balancing act. I mean, again, I don't want to have excess cash balances any more than the board members do. But we could just as easily have 2 warm winters as we've had cold winters that would deplete cash.
Well, that would be very nice. But Joe, in addition to the cash liquidity, the amount of money that's in our capital fund, capital reserve fund, another factor that weighs into this that you're very good at handling is our pension reserve and how we've continued to fund that. I think that's a major factor. And maybe you want to comment on that a little bit, on how that reflects on bond ratings.
You know, it's interesting, and they do absolutely look at your percent funded. And in fact, as the board is aware, if you dip below 80%, you get to visit the folks in the state of Nebraska to challenge you on what you're doing in terms of managing pension. So we take great pride in the fact that we are fulfilling promises that we've made to our employees by healthy pension funding. It comes at a cost, which I just put on the board at $13.5 million. But it's absolutely a factor they look at, they being the credit analyst, when they look at the way you run your business. The other thing they've started to look at, which they never used to, is the other post-employment benefits funding. We've gotten questions on that with the last couple of reviews. Not the same level of focus, mind you. And in fact, they would tell you that the fact that we're contributing to a trust differentiates us from some, because obviously we weren't prior to 2016. Another measure of positivity from their perspective. And the other thing that they often ask about is relationship with your board. They appreciate the role you all set in setting rates. And if you do a good job and try to inform the board best possible, they count on you educated enough so that you can have a sufficient rate structure to address your needs.
Oh, that's really interesting. I had no idea
every
about
time
that.
they ask it, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for enlightening me.
Yes.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. As you know, I'm still getting up to speed on all the terms and all of the appropriations terms. So here's just a general question. Did you consider, and when I say you, the decision makers in terms of, you know, money in, money out, consider at any iteration the use of the unrestricted cash, like let's say this much of this, and maybe we get a 2% increase proposal, this much unrestricted cash, and maybe get a 1.8. Did you run those numbers or consider that?
Well, in fact, to that point, Director Cook, the last 5-year view of this budget actually included another bond related to our gas infrastructure replacement, another $30-some million in 2021. The current 5-year view does not. because we understand we have built up cash that we can now perhaps avoid borrowing or borrow less than we first anticipated. We're also not borrowing any money related to the headquarters that will be funded from operating cash. And then again, we're always having to plan at least 5 years in advance. But then at the end of that, we're still looking at perhaps a second construction center that we also don't anticipate bonding. So again, we absolutely do the sensitivity you're describing, and every time we do a cash flow, we show what impact it has on absolute cash balances as well as the number of days cash on hand.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Joe, I just wanted to say I'm very pleased with this budget, and thank you for the hard work. It's great that we can hold the line on this and still have our employees enjoy salary increases and a competitive wage, and that's very important for the successful operation, is that we have employees that are well compensated. So it's really kind of amazing how you can do this, you and all your staff, hold the line like this and still accomplish the things we have.
Thank you. Again, big thanks to Mark Myers, who runs the accounting area, and Stephanie Lemons is present. She does a lot of the grinding, and Billy Klingeman and Brandon Myers. And I told you the 4,000 hours that are consumed district-wide on this effort. So I get to speak about it. They do a lot of grinding.
One last comment, then I'll quit. Back in 2010, Commissioner Howard, we had zero cash reserves, and we were in violation of our bond covenant. We did not have our debt coverage at the level that was required, and our bond rating was reduced. So not only no cash reserves, bond rating reduced, and this team decided we can't live like that. We represent our ratepayers. We got to represent our ratepayers in the highest level of fiduciary responsibility. So they embarked on a plan to increase those gas reserves, change our bond covenants so we are not in violation, and do what's right so that we're positioned for the long term. And this company right now, I think, is positioned for the long term for the challenges we face.
I was just going to add one last thing, and I meant to bring this up when Geneva was speaking, but I think it bears repeating that every year that we get the budget presentation in November and December, looking at the residential water rates and the 40-plus participants in the Memphis survey, I think it bears repeating that we have 3 reliable water plants that we call it the triangle of reliability. And I would venture to say that we are the envy of these other cities with those 3 water plants, and the fact that we can provide water at a reasonable rate, gas and water at a reasonable rate, is a testament to our employees, management, and my colleagues on this board and previous boards. So thanks for all your hard work, Joe, and your team.
And I think the flood response not only pointed out the quality of the physical assets, but also the people that run those assets. We performed very well.
Yeah, I think you do, as I said earlier, an amazing job. And for me, for being on this board, the 3 things I consider with the gas and the electric both is reliability, affordability, and certainly having an infrastructure that we can count on. It's important that we never fall into a situation, for example, like Flint, Michigan. We have that responsibility as a board and as management.
Absolutely. Any further?
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
I would now like to open it up, the discussion for public to comment. Is there anyone in the audience who has any comments to share? And if so, please step up to the podium and state your name and address. And even if we see none, we will keep the public hearing open the remainder of the committee meeting at least, and perhaps after that too. Okay, seeing none, Raid Stanley will give us a discussion about the boardroom at the new headquarters.
Good morning, Raid Stanley, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer. As you can see in the memo that's in your board book, me and Mr. DeBoer met with Metro, and I've also included in that memo a very high-level illustration of where the bus route, an option of where a bus or van can take our customers from that 72nd and Ames Transit Center up to 7350, specifically on the date that you choose to be the board meeting, and with the specific times that also you choose. That was asked by Director Howard, and that was our response. But we also looked into what we call Uber for Business. Essentially, businesses use Uber for customers, a voucher system that they would enter into their app. Then the district would obviously pay for that. And essentially what that is, again, it's specific to the date, specific times, and it's specific to the radius of the headquarters. So those are the two options to get our customers from wherever they may be in our service area to 7350 with the use of public transportation or through that Uber for business.
Right, do
If you
have a
decide,
slide?
I'm sorry, if you decide that the board meetings would be at 7350. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, do you have a slide of that so that folks can see?
Oh, I can. I don't.
I can't, I don't.
No, board minutes themselves. Also board minutes. Yep, you have it. And it should be in the,
Where's the new building located on this?
Yep, I know where I'm going.
yeah, thanks. That's why we keep Garrett around. He's a faster
Yeah.
typer than me.
It's a load here.
Thank you. Was that projected? Okay, thank you. Yeah, let's increase it just a little bit. So, again, sorry. I drew kind of a green arrow. I don't know if I had a laser pointer. Let me see that right there. Thank you. Is this one working? Okay. So, I know it's hard to see, but that green arrow there, that's the 72nd and Ames bus transit. Then they would run a bus up to 7350. We did discuss with Metro and the executive director, Mr. Simon, about extending Route Bus 5 past Emmanuel Medical Center. That was highly unlikely due to the fact of ridership, and it would impact schedules specifically for the medical center and also for Northeast High School. So the other option, again, that was presented to us at $100, $100 to $110 per hour would be, again, to run an additional bus service from that specific transit center up to 7350. And per their regulations, they would have to stop at a few other spots because they can't just have a bus specifically for the district board meeting. So that's the only caveat, and we would compensate Metro for that service. Again, only for that specific day and that specific time window that we authorize them to do so.
Thank you.
My pleasure. No further questions? Thank you. Thanks, sir.
That concludes the agenda items for the committee meetings. Do any board members have any comments to share before we break? Seeing none, we will reconvene the general board meeting at 10 minutes after 10 according to that clock. Promptly. So we're adjourned for now.
Cook. Friend.
Here.
Frost. McGowan.
Here.
Howard.
Here.
Kavanaugh.
Here.
Bagley.
Here. I want to remind everyone that the copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall of the Legislative Chamber. I want to also remind those here today that this meeting is being broadcast live. And for those who would like to participate, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, the chair will entertain a motion regarding the committee meetings and regular board meeting minutes for November 7th.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Cook. Yes. Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item number 5, capital expenditures. Discussed in committee, I move approval as outlined in the memo from Mr. DeBoer dated November 22nd.
Second.
Who
Thank you.
seconded?
Unless Gwen wants to.
We're both supporting him.
Second, Howard. Any discussion?
Sure.
Roll call.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item number 6, acceptance of contracts, payment of final estimates, also discussed in committee. Move approval as outlined in the memo from Mr. DeBoer, dated November 19.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item number 7, Amendment 1 to the professional engineering services and general contracting services for the 117th propane air plant, cavern pump inspections. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Mr. O'Brien dated November 22nd.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item number 8, bids on materials and contracts during the month of November, also discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Mr. Zellers dated November 22nd.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item number 9, notice of purchases between $25,000 and $50,000 be placed on file.
Yes, Annie.
Number 10, main extensions. I move we approve the proposed main extensions as presented in Mr. O'Brien's letter to the committee dated November 22nd, 2019.
Second.
Thank you.
Discussion? Roll call.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item number 11, under marketing, the annual marketing budget for 2020, also known as the Bagley Amendment. Discussed in committee, sorry, Jim, couldn't help myself. Discussed in committee, I move approval or adoption as outlined in the memo from Mr. Stanek dated November 21st.
Is there a second, Mr. Bagley?
I will second that, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion?
I just want
Hunters?
to thank Mr. Friend for his kind compliment, and for Jason Stanek for his very informative presentation. Thanks, Jason.
Further discussion? Roll call.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes. Item 12, wage and salary increase and ratifications. I move that we approve the items discussed in committee and outlined in the memo from Bonnie Savine dated November 25th, 2019.
Second.
Discussion?
One quick item. Joe, did you take note that Bonnie didn't use 27 slides to present this information to us? Just wondering.
Noted.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
McGowan.
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
J&L.
Hello. I move we approve the proposed district boundary changes as outlined in Mr. Mendenhall's letter to the committee dated November 25th, 2019.
Second.
Discussion? I'm happy to see more customers in subdivision 4 as the coolest of all subdivisions. No further comment.
Discussion's now closed.
Roll call.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
AEF&R.
Item number 14, I moved for approval of the 2020 gas and water budget as was discussed in committee.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one quick item, Mr. Chairman. I talked to a couple of our folks at the break, and I think there might be something, this is just my take on it, that the wording of unrestricted cash in the budget would lead me to believe that that's like a savings account just sitting there that is cash that we are kind of haven't yet decided what to do with as unrestricted. The clarification that I got, which was what I thought was the case, is it may look like unrestricted, but it's money that's going to be spent, just not in this budget. And if we reduce that today, then we've got to replace it tomorrow. And the impact could be, if we do reduce it, I'll use a baseline of $100. If that's your monthly level payment, and it's going to go under this plan to $101 as presented by the budget, that's something a person can budget for, even if that extra dollar maybe causes the customer some concern. I understand that. But if we take some of the money out of that unrestricted account, it could go from $100 this month, this year, to $120 next year, and then back to $98 the following year, and then up to $140, depending upon what we budget year by year. So it's not really unrestricted cash. It's money that's going to be spent, just not this budget cycle. So for that reason, I just wanted to clarify that it's not just a lump of cash sitting there.
Right. I understand that. I'm falling back to my days on the Appropriations Committee in our state's unicameral legislature. So that pile of money, whatever we want to call it, blob of money, unrestricted, are there particular assignments of purpose for that pile of money? An example would be, sometimes a statute would say, great, you can collect this money or this fee, and it's only to be used for this purpose at this time under these conditions. I guess I would be curious, and maybe I should have gotten curious during the committee meeting, but curious as to if in that pile there are express prohibitions for uses of types of money in that pile.
Can I comment?
Please.
So if you look at the gas side of the business as an example and the various rate components that are out there, one of them is the gas infrastructure replacement component.
Yes.
While I would not say it's technically encumbered, the rate component exists to fund gas infrastructure, which is how we are funding the replacement of gas mains, the cast iron, though it doesn't sufficiently cover that, to Mr. Friend's comment. So we rely on the unrestricted cash to fund that deficit. And it's around a $10 million deficit in the year 2020. It's why we did bonding in 2018. So we don't encumber funds like you see in city and state government, but there are specific reasons that you have rate categories.
All right.
Gas infrastructure replacement is a fixed component. We have two similar on the water side, one variable, which is what the current level of rate increases are going for, and one fixed, which we did not increase.
All right. Thank you.
And really, just one other comment, and I apologize, the restricted language is language that tends to be used by credit analysts. The restricted tends to be things like bond proceeds that you can only spend for specified purposes as laid out in bond documentation, whereas unrestricted, and you have more flexibility in how you can spend the money.
All right. Thank you very much.
And just by way of clarification, I wasn't meaning the misunderstanding necessarily was among the board. I'm talking about anybody who may be watching that's thinking, you're sitting on $125 million that's not budgeted. Why? That's why I wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item number 15, before I make the motion, I just want to remind people that at this point in time, MED is proposing a 0% increase in the rates that we have, in the costs that we have control over. But I would like to move approval of the gas rate increase of the pass-through costs that MED will be faced with in 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Cook,
No.
Friend,
Yes.
McGowan,
Yes?
Howard,
No.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Item 16, Committee of the Whole. Is this something we vote on today? What are we voting on if we do?
Mr. Kavanaugh, Mark Doyle, I would leave this up to the pleasure of the board, and we've had some really good discussion on where to cite future board meetings, at which time we need to vacate officially 1723 Harney. We would like clear direction. We think we have direction, but I've had conversations, as has other members of staff, about this topic. We are not providing a specific management recommendation on this. We will if you would like us to, but I really see this as a topic that's purely at the pleasure of the board. The idea of locating the board to the new headquarters is fine. I mean, it can work. It's, if you offset it to the cost of what we were doing at the current facility across the street and our live streaming option and our third party that was managing that, I don't see I don't know if I'm gonna call it a wash, but it's pretty close. So I would say if you wanna have a little discussion, please do. If you don't, we're locating the board meeting at the new headquarters. the
Be
board.
starting when?
That's a good question. Last month, I think we told you this could take a year. We could speed that up. The good news, and I want to thank the Public Building Commission and .com again, that we have a nice interim option. We might have stayed where we were for a little longer had we been more sure of what's occurring with the project that will occur over there. So I would say at the latest, late next year, but we're gonna do everything we can to expedite that and even consider the possibility of a somewhat temporary solution for you if you'd like to do that. And this doesn't often happen, but I really believe this is purely a topic that's a board topic. Is that fair? I mean, I've sat on your side for a long time, and we've got an option on public transportation. We do. If it's the best option we can, I mean, it's the best option we can come up with, but there is one. And it's not about the fact that not many members of the public attend. They can now watch. It's about if they want to attend, right? I mean, this isn't about, because right now we mostly have staff in the room. But if people want to attend, they need to be able to attend as effortlessly as possible.
Well, as long as we include a section that has comments from folks that care to comment, I think it's important that
Yes.
they're able to attend.
I agree. And we think, we feel we have an option.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mark, I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, I would suggest we table any discussion of this, any vote, I should say, until we've got a full board with Mr. Frost's absence due to illness. I think it's important enough that all 7 of us, to the extent that we can, should be part of this discussion.
Well, I wasn't planning on bringing a vote. I thought that this was appropriate for discussion today, and we had a discussion. We have options available. I'd like to move forward with the construction of that boardroom. I don't know why it would take a year. I'll trust your judgment, your input on that, but it seems like we could remodel the whole building in less time than building a boardroom there.
It's not that the boardroom will take a year, it's that we are temporarily staging to the first floor. At the risk of repeating, we're temporarily staging to the first floor. We complete the upper 2 floors, then we redo the first floor. I
That-
don't think it'll
that
take
makes
you-
more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
It's really about the staging and the domino effect.
I got you.
But we have a nice option for the boardroom. That's never been a problem. And as far as the cost to construct a boardroom, we'll work on that. We believe, now I'll say I believe, that we should provide an appropriate boardroom for decades to come. In my opinion, the one we had was good enough, and that's been there for however many years, but it wasn't adequate to appropriately outfit it for the type of boardrooms that our public expects in the future. So we'll also work on that, and you and I have had discussions about that.
Okay.
Is there a limiting time frame on our being able to use this facility?
No, ma'am.
It's open-ended.
We have this building till end of time.
Till the end of time.
End of
Good.
Quick question for Mr. Stanley.
Yes, sir.
The expenditure regarding the boardroom, and most of it is audiovisual, is that coming from the money that the board has already approved for the move to the new building, if that made sense?
That's a great question. The answer with that, sir, is we are bringing up a CNA in January to move forward with the renovation and the outfitting of 7350, and it would be part of that CNA that will come to you in January.
But not the
That
one
would-
we've already approved?
Yes. Well, you've approved CNA for 2019 for garage restoration, some other factors. The 10 million that we are proposing in January will cover the boardroom, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So that's coming in January.
So it would be 10 million in addition if?
No, ma'am, it was 10 million all in for everything for the 7350. We will include the boardroom renovation and the cost and the furniture and the audiovisual within that 10 million. So it's not gonna be above the 10 million. We'll manage it to the 10 million.
And whenever we talk about this, forgive me, but I want to reiterate that we would have had a $20 million expenditure if we ever decided to pay attention to that facility and do what we need to do. Plus, we have to talk about the money we receive for it. And also the ability, all we would have ended up with is the same amount of people in that square block unless we would have built a building. And we need some room to get after this infrastructure problem. We can't do it alone. We can't do it just with partners. So this is really part of a facilities master plan, which I've never seen in my 26 years. So we are working hard to say that our facilities are just as critical of a component to where we need to go to make this utility reliable and sustainable into the future as the funding that you provide to us to do what we need to do.
Question about the money we received for the current, soon-to-be former building. Does that $6 million go toward the $10 million cost to get rolling in the new facility? Or is that another kind of a simplistic accounting?
Not simplistic and a great
technique
question.
that all right.
It went towards the purchase, it went to offset the purchase price of the new building.
Right, thank you.
And to your question, Mr. Begley, the 10 million encompasses all construction, renovation, furniture, also installing a backup generator that's going to be natural gas fed. So it's all in for everything at 7350.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to say from day one, I fully supported this board have meetings out there at the headquarters. I think it's important that the board meet at the location that our company is. And, you know, I see the employees here that come from the construction center and drive down here, you know, to drive from our headquarters down here for a meeting. I just don't think it makes sense. I think logistically it's the right thing to do. And I have talked to Jack, he's not here, and I'm not going to say anything for him, but Jack has told me he supports that 100% as well.
Okay. Any other board members with comments to share today before we adjourn? No. Are there any members of the public who would like to share any comments? If so, please step up to the podium. I don't believe we have any. So at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn both the regular board meeting and the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Cook,
Yes.
Bren,
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Oh, possibly Wednesday.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. And thank you for